Wyoming Territory, June 1878. The wind carried dust across the high plains as the wagon train rolled west, and no one noticed the woman left behind. Hester Zayne woke with a pounding in her head and the sharp heat of mid-morning sun on her cheeks. The prairie grass rustled around her, but the creaking wheels and shouting trail hands were gone. Her tongue was dry. She sat up slowly, hand pressed to the back of her throbbing skull, blood crusted in her hairline. "Hello?" she called out, her voice cracking. "Is anyone there?" Nothing but wind and the distant call of a hawk. Her heart kicked hard in her chest. The wagon train must have moved on at first light. She had gone to bed behind the last wagon, just outside the circle after checking the water barrels. She remembered that much. Then someone must have struck her. Nothing else explained the blow to her head. She looked around. Her satchel was gone. Her bonnet too. But her boots were still on, and the silver locket around her neck Isaiah had given it to her before she left Kansas was still there. She gripped it hard. Isaiah Holm. Her betrothed. Her only family now. He had not come with her, not yet. He stayed behind to finish selling the last of his cattle, promising to ride west and meet her in Utah within the month. They were to marry when he arrived. She had kissed him goodbye under the cottonwoods behind his ranch, and he had said, "I will find you, Hester. I promise that no matter what." She pressed her fingers to her locket and whispered, "Please come faster." 500 miles east, Isaiah Holm threw his saddle onto his bay gelding and tied down his rifle. His ranch hand had ridden in that morning with word from a trading post near Rawlins. A passing wagon master had mentioned a woman matching Hester's description left behind near Bear Creek. Isaiah's hands had stilled. Left behind. That is what I heard. She was not with the wagons no more. Something about a head injury. Isaiah had not wasted a breath. He packed that hour and rode out by noon. Back on the prairie, Hester gathered what she could: a broken tin cup, a strip of cloth from a torn bonnet, and a piece of dried meat someone must have dropped in the night. She walked west, following the wagon tracks. Her legs ached, and sweat trickled down her back. She counted her steps out loud to stay alert, to keep her mind clear. When the sun sank low, she found a narrow creek and collapsed beside it. She drank until her belly ached and her lips stopped cracking. She did not cry. There was no strength for that left. Isaiah rode hard across the plains, only stopping for water and rest when his horse began to stagger. He asked questions at every ranch, every campfire. By the third day, he caught up to the tail end of the wagon train. No one saw her after sundown, a grizzled woman told him. She was quiet, always kept to herself. "We thought she decided to ride ahead with one of the scouts." "She was attacked," Isaiah said. "Someone hit her. She would not have left on her own." The woman looked away. "One of the teamsters was run off the next day. Maybe it was him." Isaiah's jaw tensed. "And no one went back for her?" "We thought she left." Isaiah turned without saying another word. By the 6th day, Hester's limbs trembled from exhaustion, but she kept walking. Her shoes were worn through and her feet bled. She had started talking to Isaiah as if he were beside her, telling him about the hawk she saw circling or the way the prairie turned gold at sunset. "I think I love you more now," she whispered once, "than I did when I left." She was not sure if she dreamed the sound of hooves that night or if it was real. But by morning, they were gone. It was not until the 9th day that Isaiah found the first sign: a piece of pink cloth caught on a low bramble. He dismounted, heart hammering as he pulled it loose. It matched the hem of the dress Hester had been wearing when she left. He looked around. A trail of broken grass led west. He urged his horse onward. That night, Hester collapsed under a bent cottonwood tree, shaking from cold. Her body had gone too long without real food. The stars above seemed to hum. "Isaiah," she whispered again, voice weak and brittle. "I am so tired." She did not hear the horse approach. She did not see him until he was off the saddle and kneeling beside her. "Hester," Isaiah said, voice rough with dust and fear. "I am here. I have you." She blinked up at him, unsure if he was real. His hand cupped her cheek, warm and calloused, and his eyes were wet. "You came," she breathed. "I told you I would." She reached for his coat and pulled herself into his arms. He held her close, wrapping his coat around both of them. Her head rested against his chest, where his heartbeat thundered steady and strong. "You are not dreaming," he said. "I am here, and I am not letting you go again." She did not cry until that moment. Isaiah built a fire and fed her slow sips of water, bits of dried apple and bread. He wrapped her blistered feet in clean cloth and sat beside her through the night, his hand never leaving hers. When the sun rose over the plains, she looked at him, really looked, and saw that same steady love in his eyes she had seen the day he asked her to be his wife. "I thought I lost you," he said, voice low. "You found me," she whispered. "You found me when no one else even looked." He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "We are not waiting any longer. As soon as you can stand, we are finding a preacher." A tired smile curved her mouth. "I would say yes right now, but I might faint halfway through the vows." He laughed, the sound breaking the quiet with something warm and alive. "Then I will carry you to the altar. I will carry you through everything." She closed her eyes, her hand tightening around his. "I love you, Isaiah Holm." His lips brushed her forehead, soft and sure. "And I love you, Hester Zayne, with everything I have." The fire crackled beside them, and the dawn stretched wide across the sky, a new day, their first together again. They did not need to speak the rest. It was already written in every touch, every breath between them. The cabin sat on the edge of a slow, winding stream, its walls weathered but tight against the wind. Isaiah had built it alone the previous winter, cutting timber from the pine ridge above the valley and hauling stone from the creek. He hadn't known, then, if Hester would ever see it, only that he needed to make something solid for her, something lasting. She stood in the doorway now, wrapped in one of his wool shirts cinched at the waist, the hem brushing her knees. Her feet were still tender, but she walked without help, slow and straight-backed. The bruises along her ribs were yellowing, and the cut behind her ear had scabbed clean. "You made all this with your own hands?" she asked, brushing her fingers along the doorframe. Isaiah looked up from the firewood he was stacking. "I figured if you were coming west, you deserved more than a tent and a lean-to." She stepped inside. The floor was swept, the hearth swept clean. There was a low cot with a thick quilt and shelves lined with jars of dried beans, flour, salt. A rifle hung above the mantel. Everything was quiet, sturdy, useful. "Like him. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again," she said. Isaiah set down the last of the wood and joined her inside, wiping his hands on his trousers. "I knew I would. It was just a matter of when." She reached for his hand. "You always been so certain of things?" He studied her, eyes steady. "Only about you." They ate in silence that night, cornbread, wild greens, and a bit of smoked mule deer. Hester chewed slowly, her stomach still uneasy after so many days without real food. The table between them was scarred from use, its edges worn smooth by time and touch. "I thought I'd feel safe once I stopped walking," she said, setting her tin cup aside. "But my shoulders are still tight, like I'm waiting for something to go wrong again." "You don't need to explain," Isaiah said. "That kind of fear doesn't listen to reason." She looked at the fire, its light flickering low across the hearthstones. "I don't know how to let it go." "You don't have to let go of anything," he said. "You just have to let me stand beside it." She turned toward him. "And what if it never fades? Then I'll live with it too." He brought her hand up to his chest, pressing it flat against his heartbeat. It was slow and even, a drum she could rest her own rhythm against. Later, she lay on the cot beneath his quilt, listening to the night sounds she hadn't heard in days: crickets, the shift of wind through cottonwood branches, the soft creak of the rafters. Isaiah sat nearby, mending a torn saddle strap by lantern light. "Do you miss Kansas?" she asked after a while. He didn't look up from his stitching. "Not the land. My mother's buried there, so I think of her sometimes. But I don't look back. You never told me what made you leave." He paused, thumb smoothing the edge of the leather. "After the war, I went home to a field full of weeds and a house full of ghosts. I figured if I stayed, I'd rot with it. So I sold what I could and headed west." "You lost people," she said. "Only ones I had." She folded her hands beneath her cheek. "Then we're both starting from near nothing." He nodded once. But starting's the part that matters. In the morning, she helped him salt the last of the venison and hang it to dry near the smokehouse. Her hands were still weak, but she moved with purpose, sleeves rolled past her elbows. Isaiah handed her a strip of meat. "You don't have to work yet." "I want to," she said. "I've done enough waiting." They worked until the sun rose high, then rested beneath the lean-to by the spring. The breeze smelled of sage and river rock. She leaned back against the post and watched a hawk circle high overhead. "I used to think I'd end up in a town somewhere," she said. "Teaching letters, maybe. I never pictured land like this. I never pictured a man like you." Isaiah didn't answer right away. He watched the hawk too, his hat tipped low over his brow. "You don't have to stay," he said. "Not out of duty. Not because of a promise we made before all this." Her gaze didn't leave him. "I don't believe in duty without want. And I still want you." He let out a slow breath. "Then I'll start building the second room." She smiled without showing teeth. "I'll help you frame the windows." They stayed there a while longer, side by side, saying nothing more. The wind moved through the grass like a river, bending but never breaking it. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, something permanent began to take root. A week passed, marked by the rhythm of small things: grinding cornmeal, mending seams, tending the stove before dawn. Mornings began with the scrape of Isaiah's boots on the porch and ended with the hush of his breath slowing beside her in the dark. No declarations passed between them, but they moved like two halves of the same labor, settling into life not with fanfare but with steadiness. One evening, as the last light thinned over the spruce line, Isaiah returned from checking the northwest fence line with a shallow cut along his forearm. Hester stood from where she was boiling water and crossed the room without hesitation. "What did this?" she asked, already reaching for the cloth beside the basin. "Barbed wire snapped," he said. "Fool thing. Loosened in the wind, I reckon." She dabbed the wound clean with cool water, her brow drawn. "It's deeper than it looks." He winced as she pressed the cloth. "I've had worse. That doesn't mean this should go untreated." "I didn't say it should." She looked up at him, her fingers still at his skin. "You never complain." He shrugged with his uninjured shoulder. "Complaining doesn't fix much." She tied the bandage snug, then sat back. "You don't have to be made of stone." He studied her face, quiet a moment. "And if I'm not, I'll still be here," she said. "I'd rather know your truth than your silence." He nodded once and looked down at the wound. "I was angry, not at the wire, at the thought of you out there alone, thinking no one would come for you. I stopped believing anyone would," she said. "After the second night, I thought maybe I was meant to disappear." Isaiah's hand found hers, rough palm warm against her knuckles. "You're not meant to be alone. Not then. Not now." Out in the yard, the mare whinnied low. Isaiah stood and moved toward the door, but Hester caught his sleeve. "Wait," she said. "There's something I need to ask." He turned back, eyes steady. "When I was walking, I thought about what kind of life I'd have if I did make it. What kind of woman I'd be. I thought maybe I'd never feel right again, not with people, not even with myself." He waited. "But since you found me, since we came here, I don't feel broken, Isaiah. I feel like I'm growing into someone new. And I want to know if that's someone you still want. You think I came all this way just to settle for who you were?" His voice was quiet. "I came for the woman you are now and the one you'll become beside me." She looked down, blinking fast. He stepped closer. "I want to see the day you take the reins and ride out ahead of me. I want to watch you build things that weren't possible before. I want to grow with you, not around you." Her breath caught. "Then I think I'd like to marry you tomorrow." His lips parted just slightly. "Are you certain?" "I've never been more." He nodded once, not smiling, but the weight in his shoulders eased. "There's a preacher in Fort McKinney. It's a ride, but I'll saddle the horses at first light." She stepped into him then, resting her temple against his chest. "I want no big gathering, just you and me and the vows. That's all I want too." They stood there until the moon rose, casting pale silver across the floorboards. The next morning, they rode east as the sun crested over the bluffs. The trail to Fort McKinney wound through low hills where wild roses bloomed along the edges of the trail. Hester rode with her back straight, shadow trailing long behind her. They reached the post by mid-afternoon. The preacher was an older man with a stiff gait and a kind gaze. He led them behind the chapel where the cottonwoods cast long shade and the wind stirred the grass like a hymn. Hester wore a clean calico dress Isaiah had bought from a trader months ago, never knowing if she'd wear it. Her hair was pulled back and her eyes didn't waver once during the vows. Isaiah held both her hands as he spoke. I promise to stand beside you no matter what comes. I'll build this life with you, not just the home, but the days inside it. She answered with her voice low and certain. I promise to walk with you, not just when it's easy, but when the ground splits and the wind bites. I'll be your shelter, as you've been mine. The preacher nodded, and that was that. There was no audience, no supper feast. But when Isaiah kissed her, it was with the steadiness of a man who had spent cold nights searching, and the quiet joy of finding the one thing he could not live without. They rode home in silence, the sky above them wide and open. At the cabin, Isaiah lifted her down from the saddle, then stood with his hand at her back, looking at the place they had already begun to shape together. She touched the doorframe as they stepped inside. I think we ought to build that second room, she said. He looked at her, then nodded once. Let's start tomorrow. The second room rose slowly, board by board, over the course of 2 warm weeks in July. Isaiah cut the pine himself from the ridge above the creek, hauling it down with the draft mare and hewing each plank by hand. Hester kept to the sawhorses, measuring and planing, her hands blistered but steady. They spoke little while they worked, but the rhythm between them was easy, shared glances, nods, the simple trust of knowing the other would finish what was started. One morning, after the roof beams were settled and the frame stood clean against the sky, Hester leaned against the ladder and said, Did you ever think you'd build a home like this? Not just a place to sleep, but something you'd hand down. Isaiah stepped back to scan the pitch of the roof. Didn't think much past surviving for a long time. But I reckon this is the first thing I've built that feels like it'll hold. She watched him a moment, then passed him the mallet. It will. That evening, they sat on the porch eating boiled beans with onions from the garden she'd managed to coax up near the fence line. The breeze carried the scent of warm pine and the faint tang of wood ash from the fire pit. Isaiah set down his tin plate. I ran into a man near Split Rock once, years back. Said he'd come west to outrun everything that had gone wrong behind him. But he looked haunted, like he never stopped running. Hester glanced sideways. And you? I came for quiet, he said. For the chance to be good without needing to prove it. She folded her hands in her lap. I used to think proving myself was the only way to be worth anything. That if I worked harder, kept my head down, folks wouldn't notice I didn't belong. He rested his elbows on his knees. What changed your mind? You did, she said. Not with words. Just with how you never looked at me like I had to earn this. He didn't answer. Just reached for her hand and held it in his, calluses catching gently at her knuckles. They finished the second room by the 3rd week. The walls were chinked tight, the window trimmed in clean cedar. Hester laid out a woven quilt across the sturdy bed frame Isaiah had built from leftover beams. She stood there a long time before she spoke again. Do you want children? Her voice was quiet, but not uncertain. Isaiah leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Thought about it now and again, but only if it was with someone who could show them how to be steady. Someone like you. She didn't reply right away. Then, I worry I wouldn't know how. I didn't have much to learn from. You know what it means to be kind. That's more than most start with. She turned, her eyes steady. Then maybe we'll grow into it, same as we've done everything else. He nodded. We'll let the land decide the pace. That night, they moved into the new room. There was no ceremony to it, just the sound of the lantern being turned down and the quilt rustling as they lay beside each other. Hester ran her fingers along the grain of the headboard. I used to dream about houses, she whispered in the dark. Ones with lace curtains and polished floors. But somehow this is the first place that's ever felt mine. Isaiah shifted closer, his hand finding her waist beneath the blanket. It's not just yours, he said. It's ours. She turned toward him, their foreheads brushing. I'm not afraid anymore. You don't have to be. Not here. Outside. The wind moved through the grass in steady waves, and the cabin held its silence like a promise. Inside, two people lay close in the dark, not needing to speak what they already lived. And come morning, the sun would rise on a home that was no longer just shelter, but belonging. August settled over the land with a dry hush. The grass browned, the air thinned, and the days stretched long with a stillness that made every sound feel louder: the rustle of a bird lifting from a fence post, the creak of the well crank, the low grunt of the mare shifting her weight beneath the shade. Hester stood in the garden, a shallow basket hooked in her arm, squinting toward the hills. Isaiah had gone out before sunup to check the north pasture for signs of elk or stray cattle. He said he'd be back before mid-morning, but the sun was already leaning past noon. She pulled a squash from the vine, brushing the dust from its skin. Her hand trembled faintly, not from fear she knew Isaiah was capable, but from the ache that came with caring for someone too deeply to be still when they were late. When the mare's hoofbeats finally rose along the eastern rise, she didn't run to him. She kept picking through the beans, letting the quiet pride of patience hold her in place. He tied the gelding, brushed the dust from his sleeves, and joined her beside the rows. "Found what you were looking for?" she asked without looking up. "Couple of mule deer prints. Might be a small herd passing through. No sign of trouble." She straightened and handed him the basket. "You're late. I sat a while on the ridge. Thought I saw smoke west of the timberline." She paused, her fingers still curled around the last beanstalk. "Was it a campfire? Burn off from lightning. Nothing near us." He shifted the basket to one hip. "You always watch the horizon when I'm gone?" She wiped her hands on her apron. "I don't mean to. It just happens." He nodded. "It's all right. I watch it too when you ride out." They shelled the beans on the porch that evening, knees brushing as their hands worked through the pile. A soft wind moved through the cottonwoods near the creek, fluttering the drying herbs she'd strung beneath the eaves. She glanced over at him. "You ever think about selling off some of the stock? Might make the land easier to manage." "I have," he said, "but it'd change things. Everything changes sooner or later." He looked at her sidelong. "You thinking of something in particular?" She set another empty pot aside. "I had a letter from a woman I knew back in Kansas. She's starting a schoolhouse out near Laramie. Asked if I'd come teach." He didn't speak right away, just rubbed his thumb along the edge of the wooden bowl. She kept her voice even. "I told her no, but it got me thinking. About leaving? About what I want to build here. What I want to grow beyond harvest and fences." He glanced up. "And I want to teach," she said. "Not in a town, not in a schoolhouse, but here. For the ones who end up out this way with no letters, no numbers. There's a freight family east of the ridge, 3 children. Can't read a word between them. I could start there." His gaze didn't waver. "You sure that's what you want?" She nodded. "I don't need a blackboard or a bell. Just a space to begin." He reached for her hand, rough fingers closing over hers. "Then we'll build it. I'll help raise the walls, same as we did the room." She looked down at their joined hands. "I never thought I'd be given space to choose." "You weren't given it," he said. "You took it. That's what makes it yours." They sat quiet after that, the bowl between them nearly full of beans. Inside the cabin, the lantern flickered low. In early September, they cleared a patch of ground near the southern fence line, close enough to the cabin to be safe, far enough for the children to feel it was their own. Isaiah built a small structure with 2 windows and a wide door. Hester hung a length of muslin over the entrance and laid out a few benches from old wagon boards. The first pupils arrived with shy faces and dirt-smudged hands. Hester met them with a steady gaze and a patient voice. She never raised her tone, but her presence held weight. Letters were drawn in the dust at first, then on scraps of paper. Some days only one child came. Other weeks, 5 sat shoulder to shoulder on the benches, whispering vowels into the wind. Isaiah watched from the pasture sometimes, wiping sweat from his brow, one hand resting on the fence rail. She never looked over, but she always knew he was there. By winter, the classroom had a small stove and a shelf of books sent from a circuit preacher's wife who had once taught in Pennsylvania. The children read aloud now, halting and proud. Their parents left dried meat and preserves at the cabin door in thanks. One night, as snow began to drift across the roof, Hester stood at the hearth, turning a pot of stew. Isaiah came in from the barn, shaking the cold from his shoulders. "You've got chalk on your cheek," he said, crossing to her. She wiped it with the back of her hand. "I was showing them how to draw maps." He took the spoon from her and stirred the pot. "You're changing things. Out here, where no one expected change." She leaned against the table. "So are you." They ate by firelight, the stew thick with potatoes and wild onion. Afterward, he pulled the quilt across their bed and waited as she banked the coals. When she slid in beside him, he reached for her, drawing her close. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. She traced a line along his collarbone. "Only the time we lost before you found me." His breath caught. "We've made it back." She kissed the base of his throat. "And we'll keep making it." The snow fell through the night, soft and sure. The logs in the stove settled with a quiet crack. Outside, the land lay blanketed and still. Spring would come again as it always did. The children would return, taller and louder, and the fence lines would need mending. But tonight, there was nothing undone. No hurt left festering, no word left unsaid. Hester slept with Isaiah's arm around her, her cheek against the place where his heart beat strong. And when morning came, they rose together, as they always would, two people who had found not just survival, but the quiet, enduring joy of a life fully lived.